Welcome to the Hyundai Studios here on STOHD.com for STO Fantasy Playbook. I'm Will Ewick, joined alongside Ryan Cavanaugh. Today, something a little different. We've done the waiver wire. We've done the coin toss video. We've done the playbook where we give you our starts and sits. This week, we're moving on. It's the playoffs for most leagues right now. So we're going to take a look at some guys maybe you've been relying upon, maybe you've been shuffling in and out of your lineup that we say they're too unreliable. Ryan and I both agree it's about consistency. Now that you're in the playoffs, you're looking for consistency. And guys that you don't think are very consistent, Ryan, quarterback-wise, Jay Cutler, one of them in Chicago.
Well, as a general rule for a quarterback going into the playoffs, they need to get you 200 yards passing. Jay Cutler, in the last 6 games, has only surpassed 200 yards 2 times. He's only thrown 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games. And when you talk about inconsistency, that's Jay Cutler. 1 week up, 1 week down. Another guy similar to that is Joe Flacco. In his last 8 games, he's only surpassed 200 yards 3 times, and he scored single digits in fantasy numbers in 4 of those 8 games. If you have a quarterback and you want to make it to the next round of the playoffs, he's got to get you more than 10 points.
And my 2 quarterbacks, both on different ends of the spectrum. Colin Kaepernick, kind of that sexy pick that everyone's jumping on the bandwagon right now. He's unproven. He's unreliable to me, and I think there are better options out there when you look at the whole body of work in the season. I think he's too much of a question mark. And the other one, Phillip Rivers, not a very good year for him when he has 15 INTs and 18 touchdowns. Passing yards kind of low for him for playing the full season. I think Phillip Rivers, it is a passing team, but the Chargers have been struggling all year, and that's when they're trying to make the playoffs. They're not looking for that anymore. They're just playing for pride. So I don't think that's going to be any more motivation than the playoffs were. So I'm sitting both of them. Now, we tell you guys that we think are unreliable, but who would we play over them? Maybe like an Andrew Luck, a Carson Palmer. Would you agree with that?
I'd throw Josh Freeman in the mix. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have become a passing team, and Freeman's someone who's been overlooked in a lot of leagues.
And these are guys that have kind of consistently lately put it together where I feel more comfortable putting them in. We move on to running back now, and one of them for you, a big-name guy coming back from injury. You think LaShawn McCoy should just be benched right now?
Well, you have the emergence of Bryce Brown. You have Michael Vick, who lost his job in Philadelphia to Nick Foles while injured. I don't think Shady McCoy's losing his job, but I do think he's going to be on a timeshare. They're not going to throw him back out there with a concussion, and you can't keep Bryce Brown on the bench. The second guy I have is Sean Green. He's a guy who most people relied on as one of their starters, a high draft pick. He hasn't scored a touchdown in 4 weeks. He also has Bilal Powell, who has emerged as the goal line threat, and he's got Greg McElroy as his quarterback. I can't count on him in the playoffs.
I'm not counting on any New York Jet right now. From here on out, I think that old team is done fantasy-wise. I'm going to look at Beanie Wells. This is a guy that came back, had 2 touchdowns in his first game back, and then really laid an egg if you started him last week where he didn't get anything done. I think he ended up with about 2 points. I'm not taking a chance on him. The Arizona Cardinals are a team much like the Jets right now, starting a 3rd-string quarterback that I'm just avoiding altogether. Ryan Matthews, I go back to the San Diego Chargers. I just think there's no motivation there. He has some people coming in and taking some carries and some passes away from him. Ryan Matthews is someone that I am also avoiding at the running back position. Now, who, though, would you play over these guys? Maybe that's more consistent, maybe not a sexy name. I'm thinking somebody like a Benjarvis Green-Ellis that's really probably not going to get you in the 20 points, but he gets enough touches, and he has that end zone capability where he's going to at least get you 8 to 12 probably every week.
Well, much like Sean Green, who most people counted on to be a starter, someone like Reggie Bush or even Daniel Thomas, they're putting up consistent numbers each week, and you can count on Reggie Bush to get you those points, and a lot of people didn't draft him to be one of their top 2 backs.
Move on to wide receivers right now. A couple big names for you that you would have on your pine the rest of the way out.
Well, Eric Decker was a guy who most people picked to be an absolute stud on their team, and for a 5-week stretch there he was. However, in the last 4 weeks, he's only caught 1 touchdown pass, and he has 10 total catches in the last 4 weeks. Those are terrible numbers. Jeremy Maclin's another guy. In the last 6 games, he's only surpassed 55 yards receiving 1 time. He's only scored 1 touchdown over that stretch. Nick Foles doesn't lock on one receiver. He spreads it around, and I don't think that's a very safe play going forward in the playoffs.
And that's a good point, Ryan. We're trying to remind you, these are our picks on safe plays. We're trying to get rid of those inconsistencies because really a goose egg, a 1 or 2, kills your season here on out because it's win or go home. We take a look at my wide receivers right now, a couple big names there. Larry Fitzgerald, another Arizona Cardinal that I talk about these Cardinals, third-string quarterback. If you look at his stats the last few games, Ryan, and they are atrocious. You would not think this is Larry Fitzgerald playing right there for the Arizona Cardinals. If you have him on your team, you probably know this already. You're probably already thinking about benching him. The other one, Brandon Lloyd, a very similar circumstance. A lot of people thought that he was going to take a lot of targets out there with Tom Brady being maybe more of a deep threat, but Brady likes to go to Welker. He likes to go to his tight ends, and the Patriots are really running the ball more than the Patriots ever have. Brandon Lloyd's stats the last couple of weeks, not good. And who would we rely upon, though? Maybe a Golden Tate, who's kind of put together a couple good, consistent weeks back to back to back. I don't know if you have anyone else.
I like Golden Tate because of what Russell Wilson's doing. He's playing very well. But to add to that, and I don't think this is gambling, Cecil Shorts, who has emerged as a #1, and even Chris Givens in St. Louis, who is a #1 and is getting the targets and the production each week. Those guys are going to put up numbers for you.
My favorite, I've talked about him many, many times, Denario Alexander in San Diego. I don't know what his ownership is right now, but if he is not owned, grab him. If you have him, week-to-week start, because although I down-talked the San Diego Chargers, he's getting 7 to 12 targets, really putting the yards up each week there in San Diego. We move now to our final position, the tight end position. Two people that you think are very inconsistent. One of them, Jermichael Finley. He was drafted very high.
Well, he has been absolutely terrible. He scored 1 touchdown since the first week of the season. He caught 6 balls last week, and that may tell you, okay, he's back on the upswing. Let's go to Jermichael Finley. But that's not the case. Randall Cobb out of the slot has stolen a lot of his catches, and with Greg Jennings coming back, I just don't see Jermichael Finley being a part of the Packers' passing offense any longer. And, of course, Greg Olsen, another big name. He scored last week, but prior to that, he scored 2 touchdowns in 1 game in the last 5 weeks. Will, you always say it, you don't gamble on touchdowns, and in the playoffs, it's not the right time to gamble on touchdowns at all. Only 1 game over 50 yards since their bye in week 6. He's not a guy I'd be playing right now.
Couple of tight ends for me. One of them, Dennis Pitta, was picked up early on. Really looked like he was going to put together a strong season there in Baltimore, but really has not produced lately. You got another tight end there. When you talked about Joe Flacco, this Baltimore Ravens passing game is really hit or miss. I steer clear of Dennis Pitta. Also, Jacob Tamme had a brilliant week last week, but I think that was maybe more due to the game plan a little bit there with Jacob Tamme. He's splitting time with Joel Dreesen, who gets some looks at the tight end position. I think Denver likes to run the ball and use the backfield a little more. No Sean Moreno coming back on. So those are 2 guys that I would try to avoid if at all possible. But we know tight end is a shallow position, so you may have to use them. But guys like Brandon Myers in Oakland, I would start Brandon Myers over them. I don't know if you have anyone else.
I absolutely agree, and I would also throw Scott Chandler in there. And one bit of advice, information I'd give based on what you said about Jacob Tamme is don't necessarily look at what they did last week to count on them for the playoffs. You have to look at their body of work over the last 4 or 5 weeks. You don't want to rely on an anomaly of a week and then get busted your first round of the playoffs and you're looking out and from the outside.
And the last 4 or 5 is good because you don't want to use the beginning either when things were a lot different in the beginning of the season. So those 4 or 5 are good. Ben Watson, another tight end that I would probably trust over those 4 right now in Cleveland, getting a lot of targets. That's all the time we have. Hopefully this information will help you advance in the playoffs, and maybe you can send us a little bit of your cut if you win it. For Ryan Kavanaugh, I'm Will Ewick reminding you that it's your fantasy. We just happen to be in it.